Hello, I'm Chris Flisher, and welcome to Turning of the Wheel, an intelligent, lively discussion about astrology, art, and spiritual adventure. Timing is everything, and as the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed. Join me as I explore concepts that allow us to broaden our view of the world. You'll hear interesting topics, meet fascinating guests, and discover who you really are. Using the time-tested practices of astrology, you'll learn how to accept change as the great wheel of life turns. Astrology, art, and spiritual adventure on Turning of the Wheel TV with Chris Flisher. Hey, my name is Chris Flisher, and welcome to Turning of the Wheel. We are continuing our discussion today with my friend Ken Russell, who we're going to be talking about tarot. We had him on a few weeks ago talking about the same subject, and we're going to delve a little bit deeper into it. But this time, we sort of had an introduction to the tarot deck last time. This time, I want to get into some of the actual decks themselves. And then you mentioned last time the Knight Rider deck, which I know you mentioned the other woman's name, who was the actual artist, Coleman
Smith.
Coleman Smith,
Yep.
right? But I'm interested in sort of this famous deck. This is probably the one that we're most all familiar with.
Right.
And
Right.
if you could just explain a little bit of it,
Absolutely.
what's going on with that.
So what we're looking at first is the Rider-Waite deck.
Okay.
Rider was the card company that printed it. Waite was the gentleman who came up with the designs, and Pamela Coleman Smith was the actual painter.
Right.
And so we owe her a great debt of gratitude because she did such a nice job in bringing this deck to life. Very briefly, there are, in effect, 5 suits in the tarot deck, and this is all tarot decks have this. The suits consist of wands, cups, swords, and pentacles,
Okay.
which correspond to modern playing cards, clubs, hearts, spades, and diamonds.
Interesting.
And unlike modern playing cards, each suit has 10 cards plus 4 nobility.
Oh, interesting.
So I'll just simply spread these out a little bit so you begin to get a sense of it. These are the wands. Wands is the suit of fire. And you'll notice immediately that
That's a good question. I was going to ask that. Do they tie into the elements?
Exactly.
Okay.
So fire, water, air, and earth.
Okay.
And this also has a correlation with Jung's theories of individuation, and
Right.
it ties into alchemy, which we'll come to perhaps a little bit later. But each image has a picture, which tells a little story and is related to the underlying meaning of each card. What's interesting about the tarot deck is that in addition to the 4th nobility, so we have a king, we have a queen, we have a knight, and we have a page. And in some modern decks, it's the father, the mother, the son, and the daughter.
Oh, interesting. The family.
Exactly.
And they all have different significance.
Of course,
Of course.
of course. And they also have astrological significances. And one other very famous 20th century deck, early 20th century deck, made by Aleister Crowley,
Oh,
another,
right. Yep.
another Englishman, combines all of those astrological symbologies into the tarot, even though they weren't intrinsically part of the tarot when it was invented in Renaissance Italy.
Interesting. Now, when those cards are pulled, do they match up with the person whose astrological coordinates are there?
No, that's not.
It's not. That's more
the
that's more
underlying tendencies that are intrinsic to that
I
astrological
see,
correspondence.
I see. Okay. Interesting.
And so, the additional suit, if we can call it even a suit, I'm going to move these cards around a little bit, are the trumps. And the trumps are an interesting set of allegorical images that originated, again, chiefly in the Italian Renaissance. And they are numbered from 0 to 21. There are 22 cards in the trumps.
Why don't you show that what that looks like?
Yeah, of course. So what I'm going to do is
There's my favorite one.
well, let me just fan them out a little bit. We can pull them out. These are in order
Hold them
from
up a little bit, maybe,
from 0.
perhaps, like that?
Yeah, of course.
Or let's hold a few up. Yeah, do that. Yeah. Just so we can see them. There we go. See?
Ah, thank you. You can tell I'm a newbie.
Well, that's how you're doing a great job. I love this topic. So these are what the cards. These are the cards.
So these are the cards in the Rider-Waite deck, and Crowley's innovation was not only to ascribe astrological symbology, but also Kabbalistic symbology.
Okay.
And so Kabbalism, which is a subject we
Kabbalah,
can
right,
discuss
that's-
at length some other time, is an extraordinarily well-articulated school of Hebrew mysticism.
Yes, yes.
Interestingly, there are 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, and there are 22 trumps. And so there is already, even at this stage of tarot development in the early 20th century, a relationship between each Hebrew letter and the card itself. So we start with the Fool, 0. We see a young man tripping off a cliff being chased by his dog. That is actually most representative of the person seeking, the beginner's mind, to use
The clean slate.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's why I like that one.
The Magician is a particularly interesting card. This is the master of his own destiny and the creator of meaning in the world.
I like that.
We have the High Priestess. This is the card of secrecy and of the mysteries of the unknown world. Lots of heavy quasi-biblical symbolism, because being a late 19th century Christian, of course, Waite incorporated a lot of Christian
sense.
mythology.
And a lot of they're very closely related, yeah.
This is Isis, fundamentally, although it's
right.
also a version of Mary the Mother.
Okay.
Then we have the Empress, which is the full expression of femininity.
Okay.
And then we have the Emperor, which is the full expression of masculinity.
Okay.
We have the Hierophant, which is sometimes called the Pope and sometimes called other things, depending on the deck. This
Sort of the divine higher being, perhaps?
Not quite. This is the power of authority.
Authority. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I sort
Yeah,
of
yeah,
leaning
exactly.
towards. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, gotcha.
We have the Lovers, which people are always pleased to see.
Fascinated by that, yes, of course.
And there are the two lovers presided over by an angel, Metatron, or some such person. The Chariot, which is the movement through life.
Okay. The Great River.
Strength, where there's a young woman who is either holding the lion's mouth shut or holding it open.
Ah, interesting.
But she's also adorned with the symbol for infinity, whom, by the way, we also have just above the head of the Magician.
Very good. Very
And
good.
so there are recurring symbols throughout that give us a clue as to what the inner meaning of the card
And that's
is.
where the interpretation comes down, as we mentioned in our previous episode, the idea of how this has a dualistic quality, like, holding the mouth open or holding it closed. It's
Right.
very big
There's a huge
chasm of ideas there. Okay.
And the Hermit,
Ah,
which is withdrawal and meditation and
isolation,
and
yeah.
isolation.
Self-introspection,
The
perhaps.
Wheel of Fortune. Now, this is actually all of the things that happen in life. And by the way, it's card 10, so we're halfway through the cycle.
Interesting.
On this card, you'll notice that there are 4 winged animals, which correspond actually to the 4 Gospels in the Christian Bible and in other mythological systems as well. And there's the word tarot, T-A-R-O-T,
Ah, interesting.
which, if you start with the R, you get R-O-T-A, which is Latin for wheel.
Ah, perfect.
Or if you start with the T and go backwards, you go T-O-R-A, which is Torah, which is the book of truth in the Hebrew tradition.
Torah, yeah, very good.
So it's an interesting, and what's fascinating is, of course, the word tarot comes from the Italian tarocchi, which is a completely made-up word and has no spiritual signification at all. What's astonishing about the human being is that we find meaning even when there isn't any.
Good.
And we impose it in this astonishing thirst.
And rightfully so.
And rightfully so.
Very good. I like that.
Justice, a very standard representation of justice. It's
Okay.
the balancing of right and wrong. The Hanged Man, which unlike sort of neck-hung folk, is hung upside down, and in ancient Italy, in mid-Renaissance Italy,
Okay.
this was the punishment for traitors,
Okay. Very
by
good.
the way. Then everyone's favorite card, Death, which is...
Everyone's afraid of that. Of course, it could be, but as I would interpret it, it could be the death of a relationship, could be the death of a job. any number of
Actually,
things.
more than anything else, all the traditional readers of tarot think of this as transformation.
Yeah. which
It's
is
the movement
vital.
from one, exactly so.
It's a vital part of growing. It's a vital part of what it means to evolve. If we don't grow, we don't learn from our mistakes, we don't get anywhere. We have to evolve.
Exactly.
Right. Very good.
Exactly. So, and on this image, it has the whole theme is sort of tends towards the medieval, which
And this
was
is where
fashion.
the Hollywood part gets everything wrong, because they point to this and they say, "Oh my gosh, death!" I know the sky is falling.
What this is,
Chicken Little.
right? Something strange and possibly appalling might happen to you, but it will change the way you are.
Right. Right.
And it might be death.
And it might
but
be
probably
good.
not.
Right.
And it might, exactly.
Transformation can be very, very enlightening. Most people are afraid to venture into what it means to change because they are, if they're comfortable with what's familiar, even if it's not pleasant, they will stay in the comfortable familiarity versus the unknown.
Better the devil you know.
Right, exactly.
And
Perfect.
we're almost there, by the way.
Yes.
We're at Temperance, which is a beautiful balancing card, and it's an angelic being with one foot on land and one foot in the water. So there's always still this underlying alchemical connection.
Okay.
And speaking of the devil we know versus the devil we don't know.
There he is.
There he is, card 15. This is the card of addiction, the card of corruption, the card of breakdown of relationships. And then it's followed by something even more unpleasant, the Tower. This is, broadly speaking, a representation of the Tower of Babel, which...
this is a fall from grace?
It's more than a fall from grace. It's an absolute break in everything that you have valued. Not a pleasant thing to have come up, but not always necessarily a bad thing. And the trick that we humans have to tackle is when we are dealt a bad hand, what the hell do we do with it?
Right. Well, I think it would be indicative of losing a job, of starting anew. Any number of things could be. And it could be very restorative.
It's
not that good.
Not that good. I'm sorry.
Hopefully, I won't pull that card.
Right. But then we have hope, the stars.
My favorite.
So this sad set of circumstances is followed by hope, which is then followed by illusion, curiously, which is then followed by joy, which is then followed by judgment, and this is a very sort of a Christian-themed rising of the dead, but it's again a transformative card, but a different kind of thing, because it's leaving behind the past. And then at long last, we have the world. And the world is the entire universe. Again, the alchemical animals all around. In ancient Christian mythology, this is Sophia, the wisdom of God.
Okay. And it also, I think, sort of is, it also is a card of possibility, is it not? Well, infinite possibility.
This is the fulfillment of everything that came before, for good or ill.
I see.
It's surprisingly affect neutral.
Okay.
In the sense that the universe is neither good nor bad. It's a thing that happens and a thing that we inhabit. And the small good and bad things that happen to us in life are at a microcosmic level.
Yeah, yeah. So let me ask you this. Do you draw cards for yourself?
Routinely.
You do?
I do.
And when do you do that? When you're faced with a decision or looking for an answer?
Well,
or
that's a fascinating question.
Or do you do it on a regular basis? Is there a pattern?
Because I'm very interested in the cards, and because I go through cycles of preferring one deck over another, and I want to explore them and really understand them, what often happens is every morning, as part of my morning routine, I will pick a card which may or may not have any relevance to my day, but which is the card I will think about that day.
Interesting.
And it's not just the card that I'll think about, but sometimes I'll say, what does it mean? What is it telling me? How is it, in some sense, communicating with me? And what aspect of this card am I likely to encounter in the course of the day?
And do you see that manifest?
Usually. I have...
If you get the Tower card, what do you do?
Yeah,
stay home?
What do you do? No. Well, staying home might be precisely the thing that you shouldn't do.
Oh, right, right.
And then your house burns down. It's hard to interpret. You need to think about what it is that you want to do next, not what it is that you're afraid of doing next. And it's in that tension between an unpleasant card, like the Tower is a very good example. What is indicated? Is paralysis indicated? Is action indicated? Is caution indicated? Merely caution sometimes can go a very long way.
So we're all faced with decisions in our lives, and we have to sometimes, you know, by leaning into those decisions, we come to certain places in our lives, and they're oftentimes difficulty. But life is a series of challenges. As M. Scott Peck says himself, his very first sentence is, life is difficult, as we know, in The Road Less Traveled. And yet, we must step into these situations. And so when I say to you, when you get the tower, is that an opportunity for you to reevaluate your life or your day? I mean, do you think of it?
The way to think about these cards is they're highly symbolic images that are provocations. They're challenges.
Okay.
When you choose a card that is roses and lollipops, as you suggested last time, what does it really mean? Where's the provocation? And if you simply sit back on your laurels and say, oh, that's nice, I'm going to enjoy my day, and that's a possibly justifiable approach. But what's more interesting as a human being is to say, what have I done to deserve this? Mm-hmm. What shall I do to deserve it?
Right. Do you see that possible card draw as a manifestation of, or does it become a self-fulfilling prophecy?
Yes and yes. That's the thing. So what is it that you most possess?
So you could say, I'm having a bad day, and let's make the best of it, or do something that's different. Supposing you did pull the tower.
Right.
You're like, oh boy.
You say, oh boy, and you go, I'm going to pay attention.
Does the person subconsciously build that sort of sense of panic?
Chris, it depends on the person.
Right. I mean, I might do
that. I mean, this is why it's interesting to engage the cards over time. If you're just pulling one card once in the blue moon, then what does it really mean? Mm-hmm. Whereas if you begin to dwell with the cards and let them impart whatever strange little wisdom.
Good.
You see what I
mean? So
in
your, I do. So in your experience, when you draw the cards, you do see that manifest over the course of the day when you do a backwards glance?
Often, but not always.
Oh, okay, good. I feel better about that, actually.
Yeah.
Somehow.
So well, you know why? Tell me about that. Explain that to me.
Well, I think that's because there's a sense of randomness to it. Because this is the whole argument of free will versus fate, and how do we come down with that?
Exactly.
And are we living by the randomness of a card versus what we think is actually right? You know, this whole process is very, you know, it's complicated.
Well, if you interrogate yourself and say, what do I believe is going to be the outcome that this card is pointing to? Or you glance back at your day and say, well, that wasn't such a bad day after all. What was that card telling me? Mm-hmm. What piece of the day?
Right. What did that look like? When was that time? And it could be something minor. It could be something major.
Right.
I guess it is a matter of degree.
Right.
Simply the case. And I think that's all we can really take from it. But I do think it does provide a sense of guidance, much the way people go to church and pray the rosary each day, or, you know, do their meditation or whatever. It is a ceremony of sorts that brings you closer to your inner self. It's a time to pause and reflect.
Exactly.
So, well, having said that, I guess I'm ready to pull a card.
Okay.
Okay?
So let me just tell you something about the modern world and how many decks we have.
Right. I know you mentioned there are quite a few.
It's quite astonishing. And this pattern that we've been talking about, the Rider-Waite pattern, is a very common one. And even, as I say, cards that look quite different from this will have similar kinds of looks to them. And
it's just different representation. But I'd like to try a contemporary one.
Well, the deck that I have liked quite a lot lately is the Alchemical deck by Robert Place.
Okay.
And what Robert Place has done is he has taken the traditional deck, and there is quite a lot that is sort of similar to the Rider-Waite, but quite a lot that's quite different. And we've shuffled these, and before we came on there, I think we were both satisfied that they were completely and utterly randomized. Mm-hmm. So before we get into Place's deck, why don't you just cut the deck, and let's pick, beautiful. So pick that one, and we'll put the rest of the cards aside for now. And so this is the card you picked.
Yeah.
And let's have a look.
The magician. What does that entail? So what does that mean?
So let's. We've got the magician right here from the Rider-Waite deck,
okay.
And what we have is two cards that have the same name and many of the same attributes. that are expressed differently.
They have a similar character with the hand in the air and the infinity symbol, but yeah, they are represented differently. But they have the same meaning,
So,
correct?
Chris, one hand up, one hand down, as above, so below.
Wow.
And both gentlemen are indicating this, but for you to have chosen randomly,
Right.
the magician is extremely amusing, because this is precisely the role that you're playing in this show. This is precisely the role that you play as an astrologer. This is the master of destiny, in effect. Not the controller of destiny.
Not the controller, no, I would never claim to be that. That's way out of my realm. But I do like the idea that, I mean, that is very fitting. I have to say, that is kind of surprising to me. I am fairly blown away. I'm kind of restrained in that response, but I would scream otherwise. I said, wow, how did I get that card? It is fascinating because it seems, and you know, it seems a little bit like Mercury to me. You know,
it is exactly Mercury. In fact,
Mercury
if you look,
is the purveyor of communication. It's
absolutely
the messenger. And I always have thought of
so.
myself as, if nothing else, a messenger, because I can talk.
Well,
and
in this image, you can see he's holding the caduceus. He's got the winged helmet. In some renditions of the same deck, he's got the winged sandals, and he's pointing to Mercury there in the corner.
So that's great. I love that. That is absolutely perfect. I
you
mean,
couldn't have picked a better.
I know, that's kind of ironic. I mean, that is sort of like proof is in the pudding. Here we go. Because I was, you know, sort of approaching this as a well-informed skeptic, just to say, hey, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. You know, what's it like when you pull a card? And I mean, if I was to pull one card in the next year and that was it, I'm happy with that.
I think you should be.
Thank God I didn't pull the tower. But then again, I mean, I think that, you know, when we talk about this is fascinating. Thank you so much for that.
No.
It's fascinating in as much as we have the ability to make choices in our lives, obviously.
Yes.
And I think the more tools that we draw into that process, the better our chances are for success.
That's very right.
And I also think that it shows a willingness to expand. I think that's part of it. There has to be that motive.
Here's a little variation I'd like to suggest. You said the more we are willing to engage the tools, the greater our chances of success. I would modify that a little bit and say the more we engage these tools, the greater our chances are for self-understanding.
Self-understanding. It may not imply success.
And I certainly am not, well, I'm definitely not negating the success piece.
Right.
But to me, in our short little lives, to have some deeper appreciation for who we are and where we are in the world and what we can do to help, that's where the beauty of life comes in.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I think that, you know, as long as we can find a way to be, expand. I always want to expand. I don't need my waistline. I always want to expand because we want our heads to be broad. We want it to be filled with as much knowledge as we possibly can so that we can operate under the best set of circumstances. And if we have, you know, you're not going to have an electrician come to your house to fix your house or a plumber with just a wrench.
No.
I mean, plumbers can, I'm sure, but you want them to have a full tool bag.
Right.
Or a doctor is a better example. You don't want a doctor to come into you and take care of you with just a stethoscope. You want him to have...
Or worse, just a scalpel.
Exactly. You want to be sure he's got some, you know, at least something to knock you out. So there's a metaphor in that. I think that's very accurate with regard to all of the things that we're seeing in the tarot deck as well. And it has a real certain magic, for lack of a better word. I love the magical word. That's really going to resonate with me for quite some time. Even though I do have a right weight deck at home. Right?
Yes.
What is it again?
Rider-Waite.
Rider-Waite. Okay. And it's W-A-I-T-E.
Yes.
I do have a deck at home. I rarely practice in tarot because I see myself as a novice. I see myself more as an astrologer focusing on that. But I can definitely see synergies here, much the way I see them with numerology and astrology. They all sort of they're sort of like slices of the same pie. And when we take that whole pie, we are more complete.
Well, and you don't have to eat the pie all at once.
Yeah, that's very good.
And this is why just choosing one card at a time and seeing what story it has and seeing what symbols it contains and seeing what resonance it has with you is a way to, you know, gently wade in the water.
Wade in the water, yeah, I like that. And you know, that's a very apropos metaphor, I think, because we are on a stream. Life is a stream, a never-ending stream. We can't change it, and we're sort of moving down the line, as they say, in that helios of time that is always progressively moving forward down the line. and we learn from our mistakes, and
we hope to learn from our mistakes.
We hope to learn from our mistakes. And I'm interested to know if people come to see you, and as I think we mentioned in the last segment, sort of have a show me kind of attitude, or do people really gain the necessary insights that they need? And are you sort of you're the guide? You're the guide. You're sort of
that's again.
You're the coach in some ways.
That's exactly the right word. I can't tell you what the outcome is. I can tell you what is suggested by the outcome, and I can engage you in a conversation, in a thoughtful exchange of ideas about as much or as little as you want to tell me about the situation.
Do you meet resistance when you make a suggestion?
Well, fortunately, by the time people have decided they'd like a reading, they've overcome certain amounts of resistance. The harder question is overcoming too much enthusiasm. And gently reining people in and saying, look, you know what, listen, let's just take this one step at a time. Let's try to understand what is this thing that you're wrestling with, and what are the things that underlie it that you're not aware of. And maybe we'll discover something in turning over the cards. And so it's in that engagement, in that dialogue. When people are reticent, well, then it's like, well, then why are you here?
Exactly.
If
you're
they're
reticent, why even bother?
If you're too enthusiastic, then you're not
like a
being,
puppy.
Right. Well, you're not discerning, and a lot of what's needed with this, as well as in astrology, I imagine, is a certain level of discernment, recognition of your own free will, recognition that there are things that look like fate. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. It depends on your philosophical or spiritual background, but really coming at it with an open mind and working together to find an answer.
And I do think, like I mentioned earlier, or the last time we met, was the idea of that conversation. I think that in the process of that conversation comes the magic, really.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's because, ideas trickle and bounce in like a ping pong game.
Absolutely.
You're just back and forth and back and forth, and ideas come to the surface as a result, and that's where the magic really does occur. I believe that. I think that's part of it. And I find that when I do astrology readings, I'm very much in a sort of a stream of mind where things just come to me very sort of intuitively, synchronistically, however you want to look at it.
Yep.
Briefly, does the idea of synchronicity tie into this in your mind?
Always.
Always.
Always. The fitness of cards is always nothing short of astonishing. I've been working with this deck now for the last...
I would have to say that's totally true.
Well, I mean, just this.
I know.
This alone makes me laugh.
And we couldn't have staged that. I mean, that was just boom, here we go. I mean, it is really pretty darn ironic, I have to say. And irony is not the word.
It's synchronistic.
It's synchronistic.
So you chose well, or it chose you well.
Yes, exactly.
Whichever way you'd like to look at it.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I think it's great, and I really appreciate you coming on today. It's been great to understand a little more about the Tarot. I've always been fascinated by it, at least from a distance.
Yeah.
I find that the history, the colors, the imagery, the symbology are all things that I can relate to in my swirl.
Yep.
And I really do think that there's something to be said for it. I think that a lot of it is the art of the interpretation, as is astrology. The interpretive quality of the practitioner is really where the talent comes from. And I think that the better informed you are, the better they will be.
Exactly.
So I appreciate you very much
Chris,
coming on.
thank you so much. It's a real pleasure.
Great to speak with you.
Thanks so much.